Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn might be one of the most influential Jedi Knights in the modern Star Wars era, despite only appearing on one feature film and periodic cameos from across the lore of the galaxy. In addition to bringing Anakin Skywalker into the Jedi Order and training Obi-Wan Kenobi, one of the most important Jedi Knights of his era in his own right, Qui-Gon Jinn was also a pioneer of various Force practices that would prove to be incredibly vital not only for the survival of the Jedi, but the restoration to what the Order should have been. One such practice entailed enabling a Jedi Knight to maintain their consciousness after death, being able to manifest themselves in the world of the living as a voice, a presence, and even in some cases, maintaining their physical form past death. Qui-Gon Jinn's training and wisdom is what directly allowed both Obi-Wan and Yoda to learn this technique later in their lives of exile, as they continued to guide Luke on his quest against Vader and the Empire. Despite this, however, we only see Qui-Gon Jinn as a physical Force ghost on one occasion in all of canon lore. So why is this? Why wasn't Qui-Gon able to create a physical form, and what encouraged him to pursue this training in the first place? Well, stick with us today, students of the Force, and let's explore why exactly Qui-Gon Jinn can likely only manifest himself as a voice, as well as explain why this is vital to Star Wars lore and the future of the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. One of the most vital attributes of Qui-Gon as a character is his unique modern perspective of the Force and how he deviated from the views of the Council and most of the Jedi of his generation. Whereas the likes of Yoda, Mace Windu, and most of the Order at the time had fallen into their structured ways, Qui-Gon continued to explore the will of the Force in its entirety, separate from the agenda of the Order or the Jedi around him. His thirst to expand his knowledge more closely resembled the Jedi of the Old Republic, who were pioneers of wisdom that were curious and eager to explore the Force as a whole, rather than serve the Order. Qui-Gon's quest for discovery led him to expanding his training beyond what was offered directly at the Jedi Temple, and this led Qui-Gon into the teachings of the Shaman of the Wills. The Wills were a community of cosmic beings who were closely affiliated with the living will of the Force, and are believed to be the very same Force priestesses that Yoda encountered on Dagobah, but more on that in just a moment. Authoring the Journal of the Wills and guiding those who would seek enlightenment, these wills presented Qui-Gon with a series of trials in order to determine his worthiness to attain such knowledge. From here, Qui-Gon began his training. He discovered that the practice of delaying death entailed complete selflessness and willingness to actually deny the will of the Force for a greater purpose. Jedi Masters like Yoda believed that death was a natural part of life, and he warned knights not to miss nor mourn their fallen friends, as they were now one with the Force, and jealousy was an inevitable part of the grieving process. This spoke heavily to the dogma that he had adopted, while Qui-Gon was much more flexible in his ideals and how he perceived the Force, strikingly differing with Yoda in both of their pursuit of knowledge. Qui-Gon was much more willing to bend the rules of the Jedi Order to further his own discovery and knowledge. Before he was able to complete this training under the Wills, however, Qui-Gon was killed at the hands of Darth Maul on Naboo, and while he couldn't manifest a physical form in the Force, he was still able to isolate his identity and his consciousness upon his demise. In turn, this led to Qui-Gon being to partially manifest himself under certain circumstances, while oftentimes all the power that Qui-Gon could muster would result in a voice or a presence, and was an exceedingly rare occurrence. It's also important to note that the strength of the Force Spirit's manifestation appears to be directly related to both the environment in which they present themselves, as well as the strength of the person perceiving the manifestation. This is important as it directly ties into how Qui-Gon was able to not only manifest himself, but also train the knights after him in the very same practice, those knights being Yoda and Obi-Wan Kenobi. If the spirits of a fallen Jedi are in a particularly Force-sensitive and Force-attuned area, they are able to communicate with someone who is partially in tune with the cosmic Force, and have a much easier time communicating with them. This is the exact reason why Obi-Wan Kenobi is having such a difficult time communicating with Qui-Gon Jinn in the Obi-Wan series, because of the fact that he seemingly has cut himself off from the Force subconsciously, and he has lost the ability to use the Force, and is now just barely reattuning with it. This is likely why Qui-Gon Jinn is unable to reach out to Obi-Wan Kenobi, as by Obi-Wan turning his back on the Force, he also likely unknowingly has turned his back on his teacher and his master. This also means that as Obi-Wan reattunes with the Force, we are likely to hear the voice of Qui-Gon Jinn. During the Mortis arc in the Clone Wars, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Anakin Skywalker, and Ahsoka Tano venture to a Force nexus which exists outside of the realm of time. A Force Nexus is essentially a location that is exponentially more powerful in the Force than a common place, and is extremely attuned to it. Martynas is one of the most powerful Force Nexuses that have ever existed in Star Wars. It's here where we finally see the full form of Qui-Gon Jinn in a physical body, and it is here on Martynas when he finally explains that his training was incomplete. This Force Nexus, however, is a hotspot of pure Force energy, which provided him with the necessary connection between the cosmic Force and the physical world to finally form his body and a physical presence, which he cannot do in most places and situations. He is also, of course, communicating with Obi-Wan and Anakin, two extremely gifted Force sensitives. We can also see this throughout the rest of the Skywalker saga, as Force spirits seem to vary in strength depending on where they are present and who they are talking to. On Dagobah, Obi-Wan is able to hold a physical form for a prolonged period of time, during which we see him sitting on a log, which is a presence only in the physical world, and he seems to have no trouble communicating with Luke, which is likely due to Dagobah's inherently strong Force connection and Luke Skywalker's Force sensitivity. It should also be mentioned that Dagobah itself is also a Force Nexus. On the world of Hoth, however, Obi-Wan can't hold himself together for very long, and his physical form seems to be much weaker than that of his Dagobah presence. And in the vacant void just outside of the Death Star, he is only able to speak to Luke as a voice. This reflects both the environments that he's in, as well as Luke's training as he becomes stronger and more attuned with the Force. In the case of Qui-Gon, the preservation of his voice and mind was enough to commune with Jedi who had a strong enough connection to the Force, including Yoda and Obi-Wan Kenobi himself. Despite this though, Qui-Gon still had to guide Yoda to the particularly strong Force Nexus in order to help Yoda on his journey, and this led Yoda to Dagobah. It was thanks to the 5 priestesses on Dagobah that Yoda also received the same training. However, unlike the likes of Qui-Gon Jinn, Yoda actually managed to complete this training under the Force priestesses, which is why Yoda can manifest himself as a fully formed Force ghost. The same thing happened with Obi-Wan Kenobi, as we know that Qui-Gon Jinn, his teacher, actually completed Obi-Wan's training while he was on exile on Tatooine, meaning that at the point in Obi-Wan Kenobi where we encounter him, he is likely undergoing this training under Qui-Gon, or perhaps has not completed it entirely, and is attempting to learn more and reconnect with Qui-Gon Jinn, but is finding it exceptionally difficult. As always though, students of the Force, I would love to hear your thoughts on this, and this is exactly why Qui-Gon is basically refusing to talk to Obi-Wan Kenobi, the fact that he basically cannot. And likely by the end of the series, we will hear Qui-Gon Jinn's voice, and Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon will be able to interact yet again. But anyway, students of the Force, what are your guys' thoughts on this? And what are your thoughts on this explanation about Qui-Gon Jinn and the training that he undertook just before his death on Naboo? And what are your thoughts on this being the explanation why Obi-Wan is having such a difficult time speaking with Qui-Gon? As always, my friends, thank you guys so much for watching the channel. May the Force be with you, and have a great day.